So welcome. My name is Jessie Davis. My pronouns are she and they. For people who may be listening in rather than watching, I am a person in my late 20s with reddish long hair and glasses on. I'm a peer support specialist and a program coordinator at the South Southwest Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, otherwise known as the South Southwest MHTTC. I'm really honored to be your host for this. And I want to also say thank you in advance to our awesome presenters that I'm going to pass this over to in just a moment. I am so excited, and this is a really big thank you as well to all of you for joining us. And I really hope you're going to find today's presentation engaging and helpful in your work. This presentation was prepared for the MHTTC network under a cooperative agreement from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, also known as SAMHSA. The opinions expressed in this presentation are the views of our speakers and do not reflect the official position of the Department of Health and Human Services or SAMHSA. I did see a question in the chat asking if these slides are going to be available, and we will be posting this entire presentation on our website, including the slides, within 2 weeks following this presentation. So make sure that you are keeping an eye on our website, the South Southwest MHTTC website for that. And I do have one last slide to share. We have a code of conduct for this presentation where it essentially boils down to please be kind. We recognize that all people are coming from different areas of their learning, and we'd really like to ensure that everybody can continue learning in this space. We do reserve the right to remove or block any attendees who violate this code that you see on the slide, and I'll give you a moment to take a look at that. But really, it's just be kind. All right. So now that I've had that up for a moment, I would like to pass this over to our amazing presenters, Amy Detmer and Matthew Federici. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Jessie. We are very glad to be here today. I just want to call a shout out to you, Jessie, for making this possible, and to the South Southwest Mental Health Technology Transfer Center for this partnership and collaboration and making this webinar more widely available to folks throughout our nation. So also, before I go ahead and introduce myself, I want to call out Katie Wilson, who's also joining us here from the Copeland Center team. Katie's handling some of the tech behind the scenes. So thank you to Katie and Jessie for handling all of that stuff so that Matthew and I can focus on the presentation at hand. So my name is Amy Detmer, and I'll give you guys a little bit of a visual for those of you that may not be seeing the video. I am a white woman in my early 30s. I have long blonde hair, and I have a background behind me that is one of my favorite places in Vermont where I currently reside. However, I am originally from Pennsylvania, where I was first certified as a peer specialist about 10 years ago. So I've been doing this work for 10 years, and I have been with the Copeland Center, specifically at our Doors to Wellbeing National Technical Assistance Center program for the last 5 years. And I'm very fortunate to do this work where I get to provide training on a national scale to peer specialists and others working in the mental health workforce all around the nation. And specifically to be here today to provide this webinar on Psychiatric Advance Directives, because part of our goals as a National Consumer Technical Assistance Center is to help the implementation and understanding of how Psychiatric Advance Directives work in our system and how can they better be implemented and peers be a part of that process. So I'm excited to share some of that with you all today. And with that being said, I would like to pass this off to a mentor of mine, my co-presenter for today, and one of my favorite people, Matthew Federici.
Thank you, Amy. You're one of my favorite people as well. And I just want to echo and not repeat, but all the acknowledgments that you gave, and also add to that around this subject. Painted Brain and Rachel Chambers and Lori Hallmark, who works for Texas Legal Aid Rio Grande, who have been partners with us at Doors to Wellbeing and really taking a look at and talking about how do we advance and support psychiatric advance directives within the framework of our values and relationship of peer support. So just a little background about me. I am also the executive director of the Copeland Center for Wellness and Recovery, project director for this Doors to Wellbeing SAMHSA grant that we're partnering on. My history, I'm also an advanced level RAP facilitator. And so I've had lots of experience in facilitating and training the trainers in the evidence-based practice of wellness recovery action plan, which is going to play a role into today's discussion. But actually before before I knew anything about the wellness recovery action plan, I had been working within the public mental health system in various different roles, therapy, group homes, employment programs, but I undertook an initiative around psychiatric advance directives over 20 years ago and training my colleagues within the field to why this was an important subject. But most notably, why I'm really passionate about this and a lot of the work I do is that I had come from my own experience of psychiatric hospitalization and treatment, and as well as bearing witness and supporting my older brother through that system. And where my passion comes from this today was that I was very fortunate and privileged to have a strong family support system that maintained, no matter what I was going through, behind locked doors and not, maintained my voice and my choice through that process. And, my family and support system used their legal power and voice to make sure that my rights were protected and my choices were protected through that process. When I began to work in the public mental health field, because I knew and believed in an experience that recovery can and will happen for people with the right supports, I recognized that how privileged I was, that for many people without a really strong and vocal support system, their rights and choice and voice gets lost in the process. And for me, this topic of a psychiatric advance directive as a legal rights document is just absolutely essential to protect and preserve the dignity, among many other things we're gonna talk about. But I did want you to know that first and foremost, where my perspective is not only one from an educated and provider perspective, but it is also from a lived experience and a passion to support other people to have the same supports, dignity, and respect that I had, which made a critical difference in how much, really just were preventative for factors for my mental health challenges not becoming more severe and chronic and long-term. Was really not the course of an illness as much as it was the course of supports that I had. So that's where my perspective is. Today, Amy and I will take you on a journey. We're not legal aids. We're not coming from a legal advice. We're coming from an advocacy standpoint and a principle standpoint of why this is important. But we'll make reference to where you could find out and learn more about some of the legal nuances to this. We're not going to get too much into that today, but we're going to reference it so that you can get started and understand. Hopefully, we're going to sell you on the point that our system of care is not a good one until we're all behind the rights for people to have psychiatric advance directives. So, yeah, with that, I think I'm going to get us started on the opening slide here, and we can go there. Are we showing screen yet? All right, so let's get started on the presentation, and I'll take us on that journey. All right, so here we are. This is our opening slide. And so the first thing I want to talk about is just get it out front here. Psychiatric advance directives, also in some areas referred to as MHADs, mental health advance directives. I actually like that term a little bit better than psychiatric advance directive. However, most of the literature and most of the laws use the term psychiatric advance directive. Psychiatric advance directives and RAP, both very popular, both very useful. The main thing is a RAP plan, even the crisis plan and a RAP plan is not, it's not the same thing as a psychiatric advance directive. They are different in many ways, but I will say that they can complement each other. In an ideal situation, people have an opportunity to go through the evidence-based practice of a RAP group, which is what the evidence-based practice is centered around, is the group process of exploring the curriculum. Ideal world, people have that opportunity wrapped around the opportunity to develop a psychiatric advance directive, right? So they complement each other. Both of these, can create a continuum of self-direction, and they both can increase our competency and capacity to make decisions and make healthy decisions. They both can help us expand our self-agency and choices, and they both can guide our supporters' actions in our lives. One of the key things that's different is that, again, the Wellness Recovery Action Plan is a evidence-based peer group process that takes people through creating an individualized plan that's holistic in their life. In many ways, RAP is I feel as if my need for a psychiatric advance directive or even healthcare advance directive there's less of a need for that in my life, because I have a RAP plan in my life that allows me to notice early signs and indicators and take action on my own behalf before I ever get to a situation where I'm not able to voice or make choices. One of the key things is that a RAP plan can help you build the tools you need, plan as you move forward, and even up to a crisis. I can make a crisis plan that can help support me, tell my supporters how I need to be supported for any kind of life crisis. And so in some regards, the Psychiatric Advance Directive is like the next developmental step in our RAP planning. But it is different because this is a document that is, number one, is defined by the legal terms of your state. Number two, it is about a document versus RAP is really about a process in our lives, which I can write down, but I may not choose to. A Psychiatric Advance Directive is also oftentimes defined by the state's definition of my competency and commitment to make a choice. And that is not something that our RAP plans are ever about. No one's ever determining us as not having competency or a capacity to make decisions in our lives. And with the Psychiatric Advance Directive, this is the document that, should we find ourselves in a situation that people have determined that we don't have the competency or capacity for financial health, including mental health decisions, this is something I can plan in advance to protect myself legally, that there's some direction and I still have a voice by way of either a document or supporters. Again, and RAP can help us plan around everything else around that. But when we're in that situation where a doctor or legal authorities are saying, you know what, Matthew, we hear you talking, but we're not consulting you on what we're going to do to you. My only recourse at this point is to have a Psychiatric Advance Directive to be listened to. So that's an important distinction. So we're going to just take a quick poll, because we like to stay connected to our audience right now. It's just robots and computer screens here. So Amy, if we can conduct a poll, I'd be curious to see how many people would answer this question. If consider not having any competency or capacity for financial health decisions, including mental health decisions, would you like to have a trusted person involved and have your wishes followed? I see a few coming in. I'm not sure what I would want, and that's totally understandable. I think for a lot of times it's like, this is a big question to ask ourselves, and one of the things I think about, although I don't think I think my RAP plan and my support system now is so strong that I don't know if I would really ever end up in a psychiatric facility again. However, I do have a plan with my family and my wife, a legal document, because one day I may find myself in a nursing home, for example, and I witnessed both my grandparents be heavily medicated on psychotropic medications in the nursing home. I have my wishes stated in advance about certain treatment, because there are a lot of reasons where I might be in a situation where I'm not consulted on what I want, and now I have a document to support me.
Yeah, so I think mostly everybody who's here, there's a few people that haven't voted on this poll yet, but 91% of those that did have said that this is important to me to be able to have a psychiatric advance directive so that our wishes can be followed. And then 8% said they're not sure what they would want. And nobody said that this is something that doesn't matter. I think if I end the poll, the results should show to all of you. So I'll go ahead and do that right now.
Yeah, for time's sake, let's do that. I think I think we've made our case here, that this is why we want to be focusing on and talking and supporting ourselves and other people to have the opportunity to create advanced directives, right? Everyone, maybe somebody said they weren't sure, right? But we all saw this as something that's important to you, and not sure what you want. And that's the point, is that are we talking enough to people, particularly people who have been in the situation time and time again, where decisions were being made about their treatment, their financial, and were considered not to have the capacity to be a part of those decision making. And so, why wouldn't we all want to get behind talking to people and supporting them to have these kinds of directives in their lives, so that when we find ourselves in a situation where because we care about people, we might be having them in a hospital, we're trying to take care of them, and we could have asked them what their wishes were before they ended up there. All right, so how do we move the poll out of my way here? Okay, slide over here. Thank you for participating in that poll. So now we talked a little bit about just the complement, but the difference between RAP and a Psychiatric Advance Directive, and we pretty much established why it's really important to be thinking about how we advance plan for this situation. Some of the things getting started to know about is that they're essentially, they're different laws, and we're not going to get into all that. We'll give you a resource to find out what they are in your state. However, regardless of state laws, an advance directive outlines a person's wishes in the event that he or she is incapacitated or unable to express wishes for health care and treatment. All right. Again, just to clarify, RAP is different because it has nothing to do with someone to determine you're having capacity or not, right? Important note here is that under federal law, any facility receiving Medicare or Medicaid reimbursement is required to use advanced directives. They're required to. So regardless of state laws, if a system is using federal funds for Medicaid or Medicare, they are required to use an advance directive. Individuals with a physical and mental health condition is covered under this mandate. And this, again, is the broader scope of advance directive laws, right? And it is beyond just like the typical living will questions, for example, like do not resuscitate. An advance directive is, going into more details about what types of treatments you want or don't want. Psychiatric or a mental health advance directive is a legal rights document that allows a person to make preferences regarding mental health treatment, known in the event that the person is determined not to be able to make decisions about it and or determined to be incapacitated based on those state laws. In effect, the person is giving or withholding consent to treatment in advance of when treatment is needed. Right? So it really is, when we think about it, I've told a neighbor of mine the other day about this project and how it's important to me. And it blew his mind to think that the kinds of decisions around how you were treated medically can be taken away from you that for psychiatric medical reasons that just don't exist for other physical health conditions, right? That, the thought that people might say, sorry, we're going to inject you with this medication, whether you want it or not, it's just not something we think is a threat on under any other health condition, right? So it really begs the urgency that while advance directives and living wills and these types of things are commonplace in society, psychiatric decision-making, where you have a greater threat of your dignity of choice being taken away, is not pursued. So So important definition here is the difference that regardless of what your state laws say, which they do have different state laws, federal programs receiving Medicaid and Medicare still are mandated to honor and use an advance directive. This is why it is a legal rights document, whether it's a legal document or not. It is still, you are documenting your basic rights, right? And you're involving supporters. Some things, again, getting started to know is that there are two essential types of advance directives in either case, whether whole health, all your health, psychiatric, and that is instructional and agent driven, and then there's combined. So instructional refers to a person's treatment wishes, i.e. what you want in the way of treatment or services, and also what you don't want, also known as a living will. And so this is where you are writing out, you can independently write out your instructions about what you want. And agent driven is meaning that it gives another individual the power to make decisions for you when you're deemed incapable of making decisions for yourself, i.e. who do you want to make decisions for you? Best case scenario, like in my life, is a combination. I want these people to follow these instructions. Where I've left no instructions, it's up to them. And then I want to talk to them about it, right? Important to note, interestingly, for example, this is different from state to state. So for example, in Oklahoma, you can do an instructional and you can do an agent driven. For some reason, Arkansas, last I checked on the law, you cannot do an instructions. You have to do an agent. You can write out instructions for your agent, but the legally binding scenario is that it comes down to your agent, right? So for some reason in Arkansas, you can appoint someone to make decisions for you. I would say provide them instructions. They probably would appreciate it. But what the law is backing is that agent, not the instructions, to where in like Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Louisiana and Texas, you can do a combination of these. They have to follow both your agent has to follow your instructions, right? If that's what you were to lay out for them. So again, take a look at your different states. They have nuances to this, and we're just getting started and wanting to inspire you to learn more about this and develop one for yourself, right? Louisiana, for example, you can do a combined agent and instruction. However, unlike some of the other states, in Louisiana, if you want this to become a legal document, a psychologist or a psychiatrist for psychiatric decision making must attest to your competency to develop that at the time. And I think that's really interesting. At least I would double check in the law there in Louisiana. But last that I checked, if I wanted to write one of these, like I did one here in Pennsylvania where I live, and I'm presumed competent unless otherwise deemed not having capacity. So my directive stands. But in Louisiana, you have to have a psychiatrist that says that when you develop this, you had competency, which to me is bizarre because it's almost like questioning that you have to verify your competency before you do it. These are the kinds of nuances you really have to look into and support other people to look into. But essentially, at the bottom line, regardless of what these laws are, you have the federal mandate too. So with that, I'm sure you're tired of hearing my voice. You'd love to hear Amy's voice. Nicer than mine. Amy, jump in here or add anything.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Matthew. And that is some really interesting information about Louisiana. And we're going to share some resources towards the end of this that give you an opportunity to look into, maybe some of the state-specific stuff. But we're going to overall talk about the Psychiatric Advance Directives and what it looks like kind of as an overview type of thing. And you'll hear us refer to it as a PAD a lot. As you see at the top of the screen here, it says a PAD is. So that's the acronym that we're going to use for Psychiatric Advance Directive. And I just want to highlight that this is really about wellness. It is about us being able to have our voice and choice in the kind of treatment that we want, should we ever be deemed incapable of making those choices for ourselves. So this slide here says that a PAD is a voice for self-directed care. And again, that's a way for us to have our wishes for treatment heard. It's also a way to improve the quality of care. I don't know if any of you have heard that sometimes what happens to folks when you go into a setting of psychiatric treatment is kind of this guessing game where, maybe you're getting an opportunity to like try out this medication or try out this form of treatment. And by completing a PAD, it improves the quality of care because you're already able to state the types of wishes that you have and what works for your own unique self, and really individualizes the type of care that you're going to receive. It also is a way to improve access to care. So again, this is about us knowing ourselves, being the expert on ourselves, and stating this is the type of care that I want, that I know is going to best meet my needs, and gives us the opportunity and platform to be heard by psychiatrists and medical professionals. And we're going to go over some ways that we can really highlight how to be best heard. But with that being said, I'll invite you, Matthew, to add anything additional to this slide and take us into our next one.
No, I think well said, Amy. Some key things here to really think about, and for yourself as well as for people you're supporting, is that a Psychiatric Advance Directive is, most importantly, it's a mechanism for coordination of care. There's a lot of conversation within our systems about coordinated care, coordinating all these different factors that are going on, all these different systems. But I'm the most central source of my medical history. So electronic records, all these types of things, nothing is going to pull together the critical information that all these healthcare providers and my personal supporters need to know better than if I develop an advance directive that outlines, all these important things. And that oftentimes things slip through the cracks when I'm in my most need. This supporter brings me the wrong thing when I'm in the hospital. They took me to the wrong place. And some people have experienced this over and over and over again, where key pieces of information they know doesn't work for them just keeps happening. And we keep talking about how we need to have better coordination of care in the system. And we forget that the single most valuable asset to coordinated care is the individual, right? So how do we get that from that person? Well, rather than waiting, we all begin to just embrace advanced directives, not as for these group of people, but as just an important lifestyle, right? People plan for retirement. People plan for, get insurance coverage. Well, an advanced directive is just as important, if not more important than those things. And it can resolve a major issue where we're spending oodles and oodles of dollars trying to figure out how do we coordinate care better. But meanwhile, we're not doing these advanced directives with people or for ourselves, right? It's an opportunity for feedback. So when a system is starting to get these documents of advanced directives, people are coming in through crisis and hospitalization, right? Let's take a look at these directives and see if we can track trends. If 90% of the people coming through our system says, this does not work for me, and this does, now let's take a look at that and say, okay, what can our hospital system make sure that we have let's just say a music meditation room, because 90% of the advanced directives we're seeing, people say that would help them, right? And why don't we get rid of this treatment? Because most people, or spend less resources on it. So it becomes a really valuable tool for feedback. It's like a business that listens to its customers, right? Instead of blames their customers for, why are you coming back, for this? We want you to move on to the next product, right? We want you to have a better experience. Well, maybe because you keep giving me the crappy services up front and are asking or listening to me in terms of what we don't want. So it's a great opportunity for feedback in our system. And it's a tool for holistic advocacy, because I can bring together the dimensions of my life that are critical, that are happening before and after that hospitalization, like housing issues, educational employment issues, what people I don't want and want to come visit me. All these answers to the best way to support people will be in this document. Because a lot of times what happens is we've got the legal rights part, we've got the personal supporters that come in, we have the medical professionals that are making decisions. Everyone's making all these decisions. I know how to bring all that together. Who should be working with who? And so many gaps in the system can be resolved, particularly, the people have experienced where the reason why they got into a psychiatric hospitalization is because these pieces all fell apart. And then they go to the hospital and no one supports us to pick those pieces up. So we go back to our housing and we've lost our rent. We didn't stay on top of our bills. And then we go right back into crisis again. Again, this could be the tool for me to put in there what I need to be taken care of, how it needs to be taken care of and by whom, so that when I am quote unquote discharged or transition out of the hospital, we can make a better plan for that.
So I can jump in here. And again, a PAD it's really a rights document, and the best chance of us legally getting our rights honored should we be in a situation that we're deemed not able to make decisions on our own behalf. A PAD is a way to prepare in advance of a crisis. So something that we think about before we get there. Matthew, I heard you say earlier that you hope that you're, never in a psychiatric hospital again. And I too have that hope for myself. However, I also have seen that life happens, and sometimes I'm just not able to control some of the circumstances that are happening around me. So for me to have the best preparation I can, should a situation happen where I need some psychiatric treatment or support, having this in place is going to ensure that my rights are at the best honored should a situation happen. This slide says no one wants to go to the hospital, especially not being able to make decisions there and not having personal support. And especially if you've had previous experience that didn't actually serve your wellness. I've met so many people that experience took us further away from a space of recovery and wellness, that it makes us fearful to go back to a space like that. So it's important to recognize that a Psychiatric Advance Directive is also a recovery tool. Again, it's about wellness. It's about being able to define and outline and advocate to others what our wishes are. And again, we kind of commented on this before about a PAD is a complement to, but it is not a wrap. If you're familiar with WRAP, there is a section of WRAP that's all about crisis planning. And I'll be the first one to say that crisis planning in WRAP has been significantly helpful to me being able to express my needs and my wants to supporters, and even think about what's going to be helpful at a time of crisis, what's going to not be helpful at a time of crisis, and how do I communicate that to people. But the difference here is with a crisis plan in WRAP, that's something that I choose to share with anybody. I might share with my best friends, with my very close personal supporters. It might be, something that I share with treatment teams that I'm involved with or psychiatrists that I'm involved with. But the audience of that is at my discretion. Very different to that is the Psychiatric Advance Directive, where there is a specific audience, and that is the medical professionals, the psychiatric treatment teams, to uphold my wishes and my rights should I go into a setting where often they're familiar with making decisions for people, and I want to be at the driver's seat of those decisions. So the audience might look a little bit different, but having a WRAP, I will say a crisis plan in WRAP, I think is really beneficial to ease the process and ease how we can understand how to develop a Psychiatric Advance Directive and start getting our thoughts. As there is so many different questions and different things that a Psychiatric Advance Directive entails, being able to think about it in new ways, WRAP can be super helpful with. So it is a complement to a Psychiatric Advance Directive, but they are very distinctly different things.
Great. So listen, there are a lot of tough questions and hard things to think about. So if you choose to do this, one of the things that we will be rolling out is a peer facilitated group for us to think about these documents and how they can work for us. But you can really start at any time and begin. You can even begin by just thinking and jotting down for yourself, what are some of those critically important things, decisions that may be made on your behalf in a hospital situation that you definitely would like people to know. And you could back in some of that into what legal documents or forms are out there, right? But the important thing is to recognize that as hard as that work may be, this is a way this is the only way you can create a whole continuum in your life where you can totally increase your choice and voice. It's also, from a public health standpoint, getting behind this, getting behind doing one for yourself and supporting others to do it. We can increase community safety. We know a lot of people get hurt in the process of trying to be helped. Whatever good or bad intentions people involved have, sometimes even the best of intentions of people jumping in, particularly strangers who are working on the direct lines, strangers that are working in service positions like police officers, crisis response, ER nurses, we can do harm because we just don't know. And this is a way to let those people know how to best support us. And, worst case scenario, people ignored what we said and we got hurt, and now we have a legal recourse because we have this document. So we can hold people accountable, right? But it's also about cultural competence. We have to look beyond just, this is a matter of recognizing that this didn't work for a person medically, but also where we might be culturally misstepping in the way we're treating people. And, this can also be a way for you, if you've been in that situation where, say, you found yourself in a hospital and there were certain foods that for religious reasons you don't eat, but you weren't in a position to verbalize that and nobody knew. So, in many levels, this is a way of increasing safety, cultural competency, coordination across all of our systems of support, but also a way to reduce hospitalizations even, hospitalization time. Maybe some reasons why people are in psychiatric hospitals for longer than they should be is because people keep doing things that aren't working for them while they're there, that if they knew differently, we could get out sooner, right? Also, it can help inform as we transition out of the hospital, how not to come back, right? Because the Advance Directive document can talk about some things that maybe needed to be taken care of while we weren't home, that if not taken care of, will immediately send me in a crisis when I'm back, right? Can also help reduce criminal justice interactions, right? If we have a strong support system, we found ourselves constantly cycling into a quote unquote community crisis situation, if we can equip people with the right things. And this is where peer supporters could come in. I had firsthand witness working early on with the implementation of certified peer specialist, which was totally new to a county, Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. And one of the feedback we got after implementation of that was the team said, these situations that normally escalate into the police getting involved, we now call the peer specialist in, and the peer specialist has been able to just connect with that person and has avoided at least 5 instances where we normally would end up calling the police officers, right? And so, if we know that there are particular peers that are good for us at a moment of intensity in the community that can be called in and avoid calling the police, we know that for certain populations, that doesn't go so well. And so this is also a way to reduce instances where people are getting hurt when they're really asking for help. So overall, the way we see it is psychiatric advance directives are at the center of all these things people keep talking about we want to do. Quality improvement, recovery focused, cost effectiveness, coordinated care, safety, cultural responsiveness, being person-centered, choice, self-direction, right? All those things lead to quality improvement when we are recovery focused, when we are being culturally responsive and person-centered and choice and self-direction, we keep getting continuous quality improvement. Without this piece, we're missing a huge part of that continuum, right? People are coming in and out of hospital situations. People are dealing with crisis situations. And definitely for those that are currently in our systems, doing that, we can improve that situation. But if we can move towards a public health message that we all need to have these, then we can also increase the safety in our system, right? Like not wait until people who are in our system to do this, but create a cultural movement where just like we plan for retirement, everyone plans for these types of health crises and having advanced directives in place.
I just want to add to that, that I find it really incredible that this is a document that, you know, when I first was learning about it, it was really about, you know, how it supports the individual and how does it help our voices be honored. But, you know, hearing you talk about that, Matthew, really highlights for me how much more than that it is and how it does help systems transformation in our society in general. So this has been really helpful for me so far. Now we want to kind of get into more of the elements of a Psychiatric Advance Directive. And again, the format and the structure might look a little different from state to state, but overall, these are some of the typical elements that go into a Psychiatric Advance Directive. And as we go through some of this, it's really important to remember to attach a reason to your directives. The more clear we can be, the less confusion there might be around what it is that we are asking for. So I'm going to highlight some of this as I go over the next slide with all of you, which is more about some of the specific information that we might provide. So on our Psychiatric Advance Directives, it's often a really good idea to have information about our current prescription medications, and not just what we're prescribed, but the form we take it in, how often, be as clear and concrete about that stuff as possible. And keep it updated as there's any changes. And again, you know, this is about instructing the hospitals to not mess with things. So often people can go into a hospital setting and they're like, oh, we can give you this generic thing. If there's a reason you can't have a generic, you know, mention that, give those reasons why. And that'll help you stay in touch with what's currently working for you to stay intact as you go into a setting like this. It's also helpful to list out medications that have worked in the past and medications that haven't worked in the past. And again, the reasons why. For an example, if there's a medication that you know doesn't work for a reason such as, you know, it doesn't help me because it creates me to have weight gain. Maybe not just saying weight gain, but taking it another step further. Weight gain is not good for me because I have some knee trouble, and if I gain any weight, it causes my knee issue to be worse. So being as elaborate as you can on your reasonings, they're going to offer your best chance at the medical professionals to follow what it is that you are asking for. Also, it's important to consider factors when considering medications and treatment options, like what treatment facilities do you prefer? Do you have preferences there? You know best what exists in your area, so to be able to mention that in your Psychiatric Advance Directive is really important. And with that, any that you want to avoid. And again, why? Why might you want to avoid that? Also, ECT, which is electroconvulsive therapy. For some people, I have heard that has worked wonders for people, and for other people wanting to avoid that at all costs. So, you know, thinking about different things like that, putting it into your plan. Also, how would you be interested? Would you be interested or would you not be interested in experimental studies or drug trials? Those are all things that without a PAD, sometimes doctors and medical professionals make those decisions for you. So having those types of things outlined in your Psychiatric Advance Directive can be really important as well. And Matthew, I'll let you take it over with the next slide.
All right, so some other dimensions to this. Again, there are a lot of different, SAMHSA has some websites, there's a lot of different forms, there's even an app out there. So there are lots of forms out there that can determine like what decisions that you really want to think about and make. But one important aspect is Amy went over, you know, facilities and, you know, medications and these types of things. There's also preferences for emergency treatments, right? These are situations where you may not necessarily be in a situation where someone is saying that they haven't said, okay, Matthew, you don't have capacity to make treatment decisions. But really, it's an emergency situation. There isn't time to pursue that. But I have a supporter, or I have health professionals that I provided this advanced directive, and it gives them some information about in this emergency situation, how to best handle me, right? Or support me. Ways to reduce or avoid emergency treatment. So how can we de-escalate the situation? What may calm the situation? So even when I'm in a psychiatric hospital or a hospital, you know, what there might be emergency situations within that, right? And so it's, you know, being able to provide guidance, like, you know, not restraining me, but rather if there's a greenhouse available, take me to a greenhouse where there's lots of plants and sunlight and calming music, and just try that first, right? You know, toss me a pillow and say, you know, here, throw or smash this. I see you looking at the chair there, you know. There can be lots of tips that we know about ourselves that can help people de-escalate the situation, not make them worse. You know, and then there's, in these emergency situations, permissions for notification and release of information with third party about services is another thing. Again, particularly if you had dealt with a situation where this didn't go so well, you know, rewrite the story and put it into this and let people know, and check your law to see how far the law will protect you when that story doesn't get followed the way you want it to. Yeah, there's a Psychiatric Advance Directive developed by SMI Advisor as an app you can use. You know, some people have concerns about where that information is going when they put it on the app, but you might want to just take a look at it just to see what kinds of things they put in it in terms of what you might want to think about. But again, you can go to SAMHSA, Psychiatric Advance Directives. There's lots of forms there for you to take a look at.
So this slide's also about strengthening our choices. And I think it's really important to highlight that this is about, you know, using the language that speaks to these medical professionals. So the more sound medically, the more likely that your Psychiatric Advance Directive can be supported. And this examples how we might think that we're being clear in what we're saying, but how we can really get it in a language that's understood the way that we want it understood. So rather than saying, I don't want any medications, we could say something like, I don't want lithium because I became toxic to this in the past and I almost died. I'm allergic to Depakote and penicillin. So being very specific around why you don't want these things. I've had experiences in the past where I've taken medication and it's given me suicidal ideation. So I have listed, you know, that those are the types of things that I want to avoid because of that reason. Another example here is, I do not want forearm or other restraints. This is a really common thing. People often don't feel supported. You know, some people feel more safe when they're in a restraint, but being able to describe why restraining is not something that you'd be interested in. An example of this is, due to my sexual abuse history, restraints will worsen my reactions. There could be a lot of reasons for not wanting restraints or why they would cause further harm, you know, domestic violence. But then there's also like physical reasons, like back injuries. You know, a physical restraint could cause a flare up to a back injury, or if you have emphysema or any kinds of like lung conditions, that could get in the way of that. So being able to speak to the medical professionals in the way that they're going to understand with their language is another trick to writing these Psychiatric Advance Directives that we wanted to highlight. And Matthew, take it on then.
Yep. Some things we can provide information about medical and mental health agents. These are people whom we have assigned to act on our behalf and be consulted with. Then there's supporters. And then there's also kind of next of kins. And, you know, again, you know, maybe you've been in a situation where the wrong person in your life happens to want to show up and see you when you're in the hospital. And that may be a trigger for you. And then they leave, and then things go south. And this has happened for a lot of people, and the healthcare system itself doesn't know. And if they could know ahead of time, you know, who do you want and don't want on a visitors list? And takes that. They might see it and say, well, we can't do anything about it. Their family. But if they have a document that says, you know, this is what your wishes were, who can support you or not. But then it also could be, you know, instructions for your supporters too. Some helpful critical extras is to think about information for law enforcement and crisis personnel, right? Again, this could sometimes be outside of your being hospitalized, but it may be in the process leading up to hospitalization, where there's a crisis in the community, and you could attach to this legal rights document some instructions. So, and if you have found yourself having to confront crisis workers often, and it gets to a point where, maybe there's some things that they did differently, it wouldn't escalate the situation. Like, hey, it would be, I've heard some people say that culturally, when people come in and point at me and don't call me sir, it tends to really, make things worse. I want to be respected, particularly if there are people who are not from my community or not my culture coming into my neighborhood, pointing at me and, not showing me the respect I deserve. If they would just do some of these simple things, it may not escalate the situation. It's not necessarily, it's separate from my mental health issue that, I'm really yelling at you because you're coming in and you're disrespecting me in my community, right? So, this is a great opportunity to be really clear with people that in these situations that you perceive me to be in a crisis, please do these things. And, again, some people now, we have a system where it's like, please call my peer specialist in. Oftentimes these situations can transpire. No one's calling the peer specialist, and maybe they're not going to unless you put it in your advance directive. Hey, I want Amy. She's a mental health professional called a peer specialist, and I want Amy on site because when Amy talks to me, I somehow don't seem to get more escalated, right? This is an opportunity to advocate for the role of the peer specialist in a way that can be really helpful. So, other things preparing for an advance. Household needs, rent, bills, pets, plants, mail. I mean, these are things we talk about in our crisis plan of RAP, but when we put them in our advance directive, which is a legals document, it comes to a whole new level. Now the hospital knows, please get in touch with this person because you discharged me and I get back and I'm evicted because nobody took care of this for me. Guess where I'm coming? Right back to this hospital, right? And the mental health issue I'm having at that time is the stress that was created by these things being dropped. I've seen it where I was supporting somebody, went through crisis, they went in the hospital. Guess what happened? Paying their fines. So we got out of the hospital. The police picked them up, put them in jail, violation of their probation or not paying fines, right? Then they came out of jail, and after that experience, we're back in a crisis. And I saw this cycle happen again and again. And so I know this is common for a lot of people. And if we could maybe coordinate that better, and an advance directive is a way to do it, is for that person to say, here's what I want you to do and your permissions to do it so that I don't keep coming out of the hospital and getting picked up by the police for violation of probation, right? This is that coordinating care and criminal justice system and mental health system. Same thing with my housing. Maybe I have student loans that aren't getting paid. Big one is when I did employment services, many people that where their jobs and their careers ended was psychiatric hospitalization. If I get in a car accident and I don't show up to work, guess what? FMLA protects my job. They don't need to know what the accident is. I am incapacitated for medical reasons. I will return to work. But if no one tells the employer, they just think I didn't show. So for a number of people I encountered, they went into a psychiatric hospitalization. They were told employment work was stress, and also no one informed their employer. No one thought to inform their employer, and people lost their job that otherwise we should have supported them to let their employer know they were getting medical treatment and they would be back, and that it's critically important to help get that person back to work so they don't lose their job and get caught up in a cycle. So these are just kinds of things that advanced directives push us to really think about. And it's been around for a very long time. Why aren't we doing more with it? I think one of the things we can do is combine peer specialists, peer workforce out there, along with these pads. We can develop them for ourselves so we can model how they can work, and we can begin those conversations and even be a part of the support systems in it.
And I just want to say about this slide, when it comes to peer supporters and the role that we play with Psychiatric Advance Directives, I think is crucial. I really believe that the more peer supporters are involved in the development and supporting others in developing PADs, we're the best positioned folks to help others in doing this, because not only do we have our own lived experience and maybe we've been there in similar ways, but peers operate on a different set of values and practices than all other professions in the mental health workforce. And there's not a power disparity. It's about, mutually engaging in relationship with each other. And the elimination of that power disparity makes us the best fit for walking with others in developing PADs together with each other.
And as we approach the final hour here, I'm going to wrap up by saying that, there are a lot of research out there and models for many years dating back, decades ago, that have established that when peers, people with shared experience, are a part of health education outreach initiatives, they bring role modeling, they bring a credibility, and they bring an ability to penetrate hard to reach communities, just a whole trustworthiness, and what we call naturalism, right? As peers learn to develop and use these, they have natural networks in which information spread. And I think they're critical to that. Main thing is we can provide inspiration for creating them. We can illustrate what that might look like without advising people, because you don't want to tell people what to put in these documents. You want them to decide for themselves. We can become supporters and liaisons to these documents, making sure that when they're developed, they're followed. We can help with the linking and the coordination. There's a YouTube video here. I would encourage you to check it out on YouTube. It's Painted Brain are several individuals we worked with that are talking about why this has been important to them in their lives, also coming from different cultural perspectives and how they can be beneficial. And I want to leave you with this, that one of the most critical linchpins to kind of cornerstones, center points that's going to really help this is that we coordinate with patient rights advocates. They are already there wanting to protect the rights of people within those hospital systems. And if we could work with them in having these documents, involving them in promoting and creating them, it's going to make their jobs a lot easier too, because when things are not going the way they know or what the patients want, or their wishes are, this will help speed up the process. Patient rights advocates are there to make sure that people's rights aren't violated in the name of treatment. And that's something I would encourage us all to really get to know who our patient rights advocates are, talk to them about these documents. That concludes our presentation today. This last slide here shows you a couple different places you can check out. Again, SAMHSA has websites on advanced directives. The National Resource Center on Psychiatric Advance Directives is a website that has a state-by-state starting point for Q&As around the law there. Again, Painted Brain has a video here on supported decision-making, which talks about this. And then also please check out National Disability Rights Network. So if you decide to develop a document and you want to find out just how much legal power and how to make it that legally stronger, I would start with the National Disability Rights Network for that as well. Visit us at www.doorstowellbeing.org. You can also check us out at copelandcenter.com. You can also learn more about peer support at pillarspeersupport.com. And if you're interested in RAP, rapandrecoverybooks.com, there are lots of resources there on that as well. Thank you for your time today. And Amy, it's always a pleasure to co-facilitate with you. Katie and Jesse, thanks for your support.